And the person that was with you, it was with me, they would basically grab me by basically kind of my shirt collar and the back of my neck, push me down, kind of like roll me down into a little ball, and then cover me and then run. And then they would have their weapon drawn. And so they would be covering, and they would get between the threat and you. And in training on this, all of the bodyguards would tell me, Shawn, there's only one rule. So when you're being protected and there is a threat and we are helping you to get out or navigate the threat, there is only one rule. And that rule is don't fall down. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new edition of the None of Your Business podcast. I am Shawn Dill. This is the lovely Lacey Book, who accompanies me each and every week as we discuss little nuggets of information, thoughts, or philosophies and strategies that you can implement to help you to reach more people, make a bigger impact, and to create the lifestyle that you deserve. Today, I want to talk about a concept that I think very few people will relate to. So I'm going to have to tell the story of this concept so that everybody could understand it. Well, if you've read our book, None of Your Business, you know that for a while I lived in Costa Rica. And there was a time that due to business dealings that people had, in essence, just taken out a hit on my life. And there was a hitman that was coming to get me. It was very much like Man on Fire, right? It was like having bodyguards and having to always watch your back, having to watch people's hands. You know, I learned an awful lot, although in the moment, it wasn't very fun, but you learn a lot about how all of that works. And while I hope that nobody ever is in that situation, there were some very, very important life lessons. And one of those has to do with the training that you receive if you are being guarded. So if you have a bodyguard, and presidents, anybody who has a bodyguard, you never really think about this, but you actually have to be trained to have a bodyguard. So like if there's a situation, you have to know what they're going to do so that you can cooperate in the process. Otherwise, you could actually become the hindrance. You could be the obstacle. You could be the reason why the whole thing goes wrong. So in our training, we would have to go out into the shooting range, into an open range, and practice the eventuality. This is something, people don't ever think about. Like, the president of the United States has to practice. Sure. For the eventuality that there is a shooting, all kinds of things, right? Because, it's not like just the president just is like, oh, what are we doing? Like, they have to know. So what would happen stereotypically in the event that you were in a crowd or you were somewhere and someone was going to pull a gun? Again, I'm telling you this through the eyes of the novice, of the person being protected. So if you're like, that's not how it is because I'm a professional bodyguard. Well, I don't know how it is if you're a professional bodyguard. I wasn't trained to do that. I was just trained that they had a word. They would basically yell, in essence, gun. They would have a word that, they're not going to yell gun, but they would let everybody know. And when you heard the word, in the front, they would then draw their weapons, right, and begin to identify the threat. And the person that was with you, it was with me, they would basically grab me by basically kind of my shirt collar and the back of my neck, push me down, kind of like roll me down into a little ball, and then cover me and then run. And then they would have their weapon drawn, and so they would be covering, and they would get between the threat and you. And so here's the life lesson. The reason why you have to practice that is because it's not easy to run when you're curled up into a little ball. And my bodyguard, he was a pretty big guy.
Right.
It's like 6'2", probably 240. People in Costa Rica called him The Rock because he looked like The Rock. He was a big guy. And so you have that basically on top of you, and you're running like all scrunched up in this little ball. And naturally too, you have the adrenaline. So you try to run as fast as you can. And in training on this, all of the bodyguards would tell me, Shawn, there's only one rule. So when you're being protected and there is a threat and we are helping you to get out or navigate the threat, there is only one rule. And that rule is don't fall down. Now, the reason why that rule is because if I'm being protected and we're running and I'm scrunched up in a little ball and I'm running, and then I go down, the bodyguard's going to go down because like we're connected. He's holding me. And so if I fall down, he's going to fall down. And now we're both just laying on the ground while a threat is potentially shooting at us. And what that means is that the bodyguard is going to get shot because in essence, at that point, they're laying
on top of you and covering you. Yeah.
And that's the last thing they want. But their job is to get between you and the bullet. And so if you fall down, there's dire consequences for them. So they're telling, and there's nothing really that they could do. They can't control you falling down. So there's one rule. We're going to protect you. The one rule is don't fall down. Now, this is the application for today.
Well, can I just say, I think this is very relatable for a lot of people. Not that story, but probably in sports. Like I think about our daughter when she was in competitive cheer, and she was what was called a flyer, and there was these girls that were the base that would hold her, and then they would throw her up in the air, and then they would have to catch her. If she fell or they fell, they all got really hurt. So your ability to do things properly and not fall down, especially in a team setting, is highly important and highly valuable. And I imagine that bleeds into any kind of sport, team sports, right? I mean, what about when you were in band? Like if somebody threw something or they tripped or they fell, like wouldn't that wreck the whole thing? Mm-hmm. So there's probably a lot, I mean, in life, whenever you're doing something of high importance that's competitive or even for you, I mean, that was like not competitive, that was to save your life, but not falling down is very important.
Right. Well, one thing is dying, and the other thing is you're tripped on the field.
I'm not. I'm saying, but that is not a relatable story for anybody.
But the concept should be, and I honestly, I hope that people don't relate to that.
No.
But what I do want them to understand is, so the key there is you're doing something that is not natural to you. Because you're of course I know how to run, but I don't know how to run like scrunched up in a little ball. And I definitely don't know how to do that. I mean, you're really low to the ground. Like that's right. Like they've put you super, like you're basically doubled over. And the reality is the consequences for you. So I know how to run, but the consequences if I don't execute it is that people's lives are at stake.
Sure.
The relation here though is there's so many things in business that for you guys, our listeners and our viewers, that of course for example, you know how to write an email. Everybody knows how to write an email. You know how to, basically set up a web. Now, it might not be the best web page, but I mean, most people, I don't think there's anybody that's like, I have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to a web page. Or I have no idea how to write an email. I don't even know how to ask somebody to. I have no idea if somebody wanted to buy my services. We kind of know. But here's the thing is, as we begin to execute, then the situation causes the tensions to go high. And crisis, there's a crisis. Someone's trying to shoot you. But in your business, there's crises that happen.
Sure.
Key employee might quit. Systems can go down. Mm-hmm. Processor, credit card processing's not working one day.
Cash flow is off.
Cash flow is off because of a myriad of things. But right now, maybe because of pandemic.
Sure.
You're having a hard time, balancing all of your cash flow and paying your bills. So some
You're
bills
sick.
are not
Oh
getting
my
paid.
gosh. As an entrepreneur, you get sick.
Service provider.
Yeah.
But here is the key. You just cannot fall down. You can't go down. You don't have that, because if you fall down, if you stop, if you go down, then it's over. There is nothing you could do. That was always the lesson. If you go down on the ground, then there's nothing you can do. And I just think so many times in business, and this is where the application I think is in business. There's so many times when you feel like maybe you're going to go down. You feel like, because again, you're running and you've been doubled over in half. You feel like you're going to go down, but when you understand the gravity of the situation, you don't, because you know that you can't.
Okay, so what do you think about, what is that saying? Fall down.
How many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up.
Right.
Right. But this is totally different, right? So, the bodyguard is knocking you down. And this is not knocking down because you got knocked down. This is like, and it's a different scenario. I just think that there's so many, and again, I wanted to talk about this because I do think that it's something that people don't, not that they don't relate to it, because of course, I hope that nobody can relate to it, but I just think that we don't think about it. You don't think about, and I was a kid when Ronald Reagan, there was an assassination attempt on his life, and one of the bodyguards got shot. James Brady was shot in the head. But when you roll that back, you could probably YouTube it, you see the execution of how they boom, and then they did shoot Ronald Reagan, but bam, they got him in the car. So it wasn't an accident, right? Like, it was orchestrated. He knew what to do. They knew what to do. But the key is, like, you can't lose your mind. You have to understand we're in crisis, and you also understand nobody can go down. Nobody goes down. And so, in business, all of these things, and that's the thing, people always think, well, that would never happen to me, right? Well, I didn't think that would ever happen to me, number one. But then in business, yeah, of course, at some point, you have an employee that you think will never quit.
Right. Right.
Well, they may quit.
Yep.
And you need to be listening to this podcast. You have probably put all of your entire list. And here's another one that we talk about. So how many of you have, groups of people on Facebook? I know we do, right? We have Black Diamond Club. Well, what happens if Facebook
goes down?
Right.
So the idea would be to create mechanisms that would allow you to have safety nets for all of the things that you do in your business. So like being able to be proactive instead of reactive would allow you to not fall.
Yeah, I think there's two main lessons I'd love for everybody to take away from this. Number one, as Nick Sonnenberg said when he was on our podcast, you have to stress test your systems.
Sure.
So what that means is that you have, if you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen to the podcast with Nick Sonnenberg where we talked about this. But let's say that you've created a system for running payroll and that you have a CFO or you yourself, you are the one that runs payroll and you have the system. Well, the stress test is that arbitrarily one day you just assign it to someone else in the organization
that has no idea how to do it.
No idea, has never done it.
Yeah.
And you tell them you run the payroll.
Right.
And we see what happens.
Yep.
Right. Maybe they get paid, $150,000 on that payroll sequence.
And then they're fired.
But you have to stress test it.
Right.
Right. Because that's what we're saying. Like, so what if the person that normally does payroll just quits the day before payroll? Are you saying we're not going to run payroll? What if the person that's in charge of XYZ things is all of a sudden gone? So you actually have to rehearse crises. I will tell you one other thing, just as an aside, just because we can't make a whole podcast out of this concept. But I remember one of the things, and I believe that it was Brendan Burchard was talking about interviewing past presidents. And he had asked them, well, how do you manage crises? Like, what do you do? What's the key to managing crises? And they said, well, you have to have the ability to slow down time. Because in a crisis, everybody speeds time up, right? Because they get all, oh my gosh, and
they
so
make
everybody,
rash decisions.
Yeah,
right?
They're just being reactionary,
right?
And that's the same thing. If you've rehearsed it, it's like we've been here before. Which now that's another concept, right? So you have mental rehearsal, Dr. Joe Dispenza, where you can actually, and who wants to practice in their mind crises,
right?
But you have to, right? I'm telling you, that's the thing. Is that's the sign of being prepared. And I know that you don't want to think about, any key employees quitting, but you need to. Right now, you need to think like, all right, so what would I do if my key employee quit today? Right? Would I just fall down? And that's the thing. So that's the second piece of it. Because if my key employee quit and I had 4 other employees and I just decided to fall down because I couldn't manage it, what happens to the other 4 employees?
Right.
Right, they suffer. And what happens to the people that I serve?
Right.
They suffer. And so we have to have these mechanisms in place, these fail safes.
Yeah. I like that. And I think that's important. So stress testing your systems would be the number one thing. Rehearsing crises in your mind so that you're prepared and you're not reactionary, because that's where we make really bad decisions. Anything else that comes to mind?
Well, I just think that the discussion really now centers on like, what are the crises that we are preparing for, right? I mean, and look, there's
some things you can't foresee, like what we're in right now. Nobody would have been able to.
But having said that, look, we were very proactive about that. Like, you can go back, you can document, and you can look back. It's on social media. We were talking about this pandemic in February of 2020. And that was a time when people weren't really taking it seriously. And why do we do that? Well, because I'm programmed to not fall down, right? Let me just have that in my background. And when we saw it on the horizon, while you and I, on a philosophical level, don't agree with the reaction, we're not trying to wear masks all over the place. We're not crossing our fingers and anxiously awaiting the vaccine. We do understand the implications on our business.
Right.
And we were prepping for that before it was even a thing.
Sure.
We were already in crisis management before it was a crisis, right? And it's the same thing, because, look, what if it had never panned out to be that? Well, then no big deal. We had prepared.
No harm, no foul.
Yeah, we had prepared for something that never happened.
Right.
But the thing is that most people right now that are suffering is because you didn't prepare. Now, before you turn the podcast off, I'm not admonishing you, but I am just saying, look, if you weren't prepared for this, are you preparing for whatever is next?
Right.
Right. There's you can't count on the government to come with, their PPP bailouts. And if they don't help you, then what is your plan? And having said that, the plan cannot be just going to pack it in. That for us is probably one of the worst things that we see.
Yeah, absolutely.
People that have decided to throw in the towel. In fact, we are always working with our members, not to just help them, but to encourage our members to help other people as well, because that's the worst thing. And when somebody goes down, then multiple lives are affected.
Long-term strategy, that's what comes to mind, because so many people in business just do things that are quick, that give them instantaneous results. And what we've seen in business is that things that give you instantaneous results, they don't survive crises, right? Because they're not strategic, they're not thought out, they're not long-term, they don't hold, like, they're not an integral part of your business because they're just little one-offs. So how many things do you have in place that also are long-term strategies for growth? Because those are the things that also outlast crises.
Well, yeah, you have to have long-term strategies for growth, but you also probably should think about short-term strategies for crisis management. And you can't possibly predict every single crisis that could possibly come. But for example, we're on the eve of an election.
Right.
And we've been talking an awful lot about this. Like, everybody getting fired up for their candidate. They're excited for whoever they're backing. But we've been talking from a business standpoint for months now to our clients, to our members, about what if the other candidate wins?
Yeah.
Whoever it is because you have a plan for your candidate to win. Clearly, I mean, no matter what, like if you're listening to, you have a plan for your candidate to win. But do you have a plan for if not? And that's actually what creates then that emotional strife. You're not that mad that the person didn't win because they're not your father, right? I mean, you're not that vested in it, really, if we really get down to brass tacks. But what you're vested in is the potential result or outcome. And what you're really attached to is your unpreparedness for the other candidate to have won. Everyone's prepared for their candidate. And so one of the things I like about our financial planners is that they run these models, and it's not novel to them. I think most financial
it's like a risk
planners,
analysis almost.
Yeah, I think most financial planners do this. It's not my scope, but I love how they look at all of these potential eventualities and then tell you the percentage chance that your plan is going to work, right? Well, why wouldn't we employ that in your business, right? I mean, even if it was just, I'm not saying you have to run models, although that's not a bad idea, but why wouldn't we even just think like, look, maybe with my cash flow, what would I do if, a lot of people talk about, for example, digital currency, right? So, the world is going to go to a digital currency. And then again, it polarizes and people are like, I'm not doing that. Okay, well, what if it did, right? What if it went to digital currency? Are you prepared for that? Or are you just saying that because you are fundamentally against it, that you're going to close?
Right.
Because and so you could say I'm fundamentally against it, but if it happened, then this, right? I'm prepared for that. It won't be fun, but I'm prepared for that. And all of these eventualities. What if the stock market crashes?
Right.
How would that affect? Well, you go, I don't have anything in the stock in the market, right? But maybe your clients do. And are you prepared? How would that alter your business? And are you shaped for that? Or are you just going to say gun and then you're going to start running and fall down because you've never seen, even in your mind's eye, you've never seen the situation, right? The preparation is you rehearsing for something that you actually hope will never happen. In fact, in that example, I was never in a situation where there was a live shooter and my bodyguards had to, duck me down and I had to run. And so you prepare for things that you hope will never happen. And most people right now are only preparing for things that they hope will. Mm-hmm. That's it?
Yep.
All right. We'll be back again next week with a brand new edition of the None of Your Business podcast.